They handcuffed her in public, without cause, without shame, and with no idea who they were dealing with. Officer Greg Mullins and Officer Ryan Dorsey saw Evelyn Moore, a poised, well-dressed black woman standing in the business class line, and assumed she didn't belong. Fueled by the venomous whispers of a wealthy passenger named Lorna Whitmore, they humiliated her in front of a silent crowd. But when they picked Evelyn, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know she was the chief judge of the Federal Court of Appeals. What came next wasn't just justice. It was a reckoning that would cost them their careers, their freedom, and their reputations. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one woman, it's about all of us. Sunlight filtered through the high windows of the airport holding room, catching on the dull metal of the handcuffs digging into her skin. Outside, the low hum of jets masked the rising storm of consequences that was about to unfold. The Colorado sky blushed with streaks of fading gold as the silver sedan curved into the driveway of the Monarch Crest Hotel. The place stood tall, glass, stone, and silence, like it had nothing left to prove. Out stepped Marion Ellis, a woman of quiet authority, her movements steady, deliberate. Her gray coat was soft with wear, her scarf a faded rust red, the color of old courage. No luggage cart followed her, no name was shouted. She just carried a worn leather bag and a need for rest. Marion had spent most of her life in hotels, cleaning them, managing them, and finally building them. Tonight she needed no spotlight, just her usual suite on the 6th floor. A soft bed, a quiet shower, a moment to breathe before tomorrow's board review. Inside, the lobby gleamed. Marble floors, echoing laughter, the scent of cinnamon from the corner bar. She moved to the front desk, where a young woman named Haley tapped at a screen, earbuds in, half engaged. "Checking in," Marion said with a calm smile. "Name?" Haley asked without looking. "Ellis, Marion Ellis." A beat passed. The typing stopped. Haley frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're fully booked. You must have the wrong hotel." For a moment, time seemed to stretch. Marion didn't raise her voice. She simply asked, "There's no suite reserved under my name?" Haley blinked, her tone sharpening. "There's nothing here. No suite, no reservation." Then she added with a chuckle, "Are you sure you're not thinking of the Monarch Inn downtown?" Marion's eyes stayed steady. "No, I'm thinking of this one. My name's on the deed." Haley laughed, out loud this time. A few heads turned. And just like that, Mary felt it. That old sting. The one she'd buried years ago under contracts, corner offices, and 20 floors of concrete dreams. She could hear it in Haley's voice. Disbelief wrapped in politeness. Have you ever been so quietly dismissed that it echoed louder than any insult? She let the silence linger. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she wanted the room to hear it. All of it. Not yet through words, but through stillness. It's a different kind of strength. And the story was just beginning. It started with a complaint. A small, poisonous lie whispered through red lips and diamond teeth. Mrs. Lorna Whitmore, still simmering with self-righteous disdain, marched to the gate agent's podium. Her voice shifted into a syrupy, dangerous tone. "Excuse me," she said, eyes darting toward Evelyn. "That woman? Yes, the one with the tablet. She's been watching my bags, acting strangely. Frankly, I don't feel safe boarding with someone like that." The young gate agent blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, she's a verified business class passenger," the woman replied gently. But Lorna pressed on. "I don't care what it says on paper," she snapped. "I know what I saw. You need to call security." And just like that, the match was struck. Report officers. Officer Greg Mullins, older and jaded, and Officer Ryan Dorsey, young and cocky, strode over with puffed-up authority. They didn't ask many questions. They didn't need to. Lorna had planted the idea. Now they just had to follow it. "Ma'am," Mullins said, standing over Evelyn. "We'd like a word. Step out of line, please." Evelyn looked up, unbothered yet watchful. She could see the storm forming, the way the officer's eyes scanned her like a threat, not a person. Her heart slowed, not sped. "Is there a reason?" she asked calmly. "There's been a complaint," Dorsey cut in, already reaching for his notepad. "You've been behaving suspiciously." Suspicious? What did that mean? Reading quietly, waiting in line. "Tell me, have you ever been accused for merely standing in the wrong skin?" The passengers nearby looked on, some curious, some uneasy, but no one spoke. Silence, as always, was the accomplice of injustice. Evelyn stood slowly, gathering her things with grace. "Very well," she said, her voice even. But as she stepped aside, her spine straight and eyes clear, a quiet thought settled over her like a mist. "They have no idea who I am. And soon they will." In a quiet corner beside the gate, Evelyn stood as officers Mullins and Dorsey circled her like vultures mistaking nobility for prey. Passengers craned their necks, curious whispers rising like a tide. Mullins held up her document, squinting at her license, then looking back at Evelyn with thinly veiled doubt. "Evelyn Moore," he read aloud, his tone laced with something cold. "Business class, huh? What line of work are you in?" Evelyn's answer was steady. "I'm a federal employee." Doria chuckled under his breath. "A federal employee with pearls and a tablet. Must be nice." She felt it then, not just the insult, but the trap. Words wrapped in suspicion, delivered with the smirk of men who judged her before she ever spoke. And yet, she stood her ground. "What, specifically, am I being accused of?" "Stop questioning us," Dorsey snapped, stepping forward. "That attitude right there, that's suspicious." Her lips pressed into a firm line. She didn't shake. She didn't shout. She simply said, "I'm a lawful citizen, and I have the right to be treated with respect and without discrimination." It should have ended there, but it didn't. Mullins suddenly barked. "You're obstructing an investigation. That's enough. You're under arrest." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Gasps rose from the onlookers. Evelyn's breath caught, but she didn't resist. As the cold metal of the handcuffs clamped down on her wrists, pain surged, not just physical, but historical. The weight of every silent injustice now pressed against her skin. Can you imagine standing in her place, dignified, accomplished, only to be dragged down by the ignorance of uniform? She looked out at the crowd. No one moved, not a voice, not a hand, only silence. And yet, deep within that silence, Evelyn made a quiet promise. "They will know who I am, not for vengeance, but for truth." She straightened her shoulders as best she could, because even in chains, dignity has a posture. The middle door to the airport security station slammed shut behind her. Evelyn stood handcuffed in a small windowless room that smelled of old coffee and authority gone stale. Officer Mullins leaned against the wall, arms folded, while Dorsey scribbled down his distorted version of events. A third officer, a duty sergeant named Willis, sat at the intake desk. He barely looked up at first, treating Evelyn like just another name in a long shift of paperwork and problems. "Name?" he asked, fingers poised above the keyboard. "Evelyn Moore," she replied clearly. "Occupation?" She paused. This was the moment. Lifting her chin, she met the sergeant's eyes without hesitation. "Chief Judge of the Federal Court of Appeals. Washington Circuit." The sound of the keyboard stopped. The room went still. Sergeant Willis blinked, looked down at the ID again, then back at her face. What?" he stammered. "Did you say Chief Judge?" Evelyn nodded once, slow and firm. "You can verify it, right now." Behind her, Dorsey's pen dropped to the floor. Mullins' face drained of color, his confident slouch tightening into panic. The silence became unbearable, thick with the weight of realization. Have you ever witnessed someone realize too late the cost of their prejudice? Mullins took a shaky step forward. Judge Moore, we didn't know. We were just doing our job. No, Evelyn interrupted. You were abusing your badge. There's a difference. Doria, red-faced and breathless, dropped to one knee. Please, we're so sorry. Don't ruin our lives. But Evelyn didn't move. She stood tall in handcuffs, the symbol of law wrapped in humiliation, but her voice, her gaze, her bearing remained unbroken. And for one long moment, time itself seemed to bow before her. Because truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't shout, it stands. Within the hour, the terminal had changed. The quiet office where Evelyn once stood in chains had become a command center. Officers rushed in and out, radios crackled. The airport police chief arrived, face pale, followed by federal marshals and court officials. Word had spread like wildfire. A chief judge had been wrongfully detained. Evelyn, now unshackled, stood with quiet poise as the chaos unfolded around her. Her wrists bore red marks, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was cool and composed. Steal all video evidence from the terminal. I want statements from every witness and staff member at Gate 27, and I want Officers Mullins and Dorsey removed from duty, immediately. The chief could only nod. Mullins stood frozen, his face a mask of shame. Dorsey looked younger than he had an hour before, his confidence shattered. Their guns, badges, and radios were stripped away, one by one, like peeling off layers of arrogance. It was a stunning reversal. The same men who mocked her now stood silent, awaiting judgment. Have you ever watched a person fall from power, not because someone pushed them, but because their own actions pulled them down? Even Lorna Whitmore wasn't spared. She had tried to flee on her flight, but security intercepted her. Now she sat red-faced and quiet, facing her own charges. False statements, public endangerment, incitement of bias. Her designer's smile had faded into something brittle. For once, silence worked in favor of justice. Evelyn didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She let the system she dedicated her life to do its work. But as she stepped away from the small crowd, an aide asked softly, "Judge Moore, are you all right?" She gave a small nod. "I'm not broken," she said. "I'm ready." And in that moment, it became clear. Justice wasn't just being served. It was watching and learning. Months later, the courtroom was packed. Cameras weren't allowed, but the world was watching. Former officers Mullins and Dorsey now sat as defendants, their uniforms replaced by suits that no longer carried power. The charges were grave: unlawful detention, abuse of authority, racial profiling under color of law. Judge Evelyn Moore did not preside, she testified. With composure, she recounted every detail, not as a victim seeking vengeance, but as a witness demanding truth. Her voice did not shake. Her eyes never dropped. And when the footage from that day was shown, the shouting, the handcuffing, the humiliation, the jury did not look away. Neither should we. Have you ever considered how many voices never make it this far? How many are silenced before the courtroom doors even open? The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing, harsh but fair. 4 years in federal prison. A message, loud and clear, written not in rage but in law. As for Lorna Whitmore, her punishment took a different form. A steep fine, public disgrace, and a permanent stain on her reputation. She left the courtroom not in chains, but no longer untouched. But this story wasn't about revenge. Evelyn returned to her work, to the courtroom bench where her gavel still stood, firm and fair. Yet something had shifted, not just in her, but in those who followed the case. Conversations were happening. Policies were changing. Quietly, but surely. And in her chambers one morning, she looked out the window, coffee in hand, and whispered to herself, "It wasn't just for me. It was for the ones watching, the ones waiting, the ones still standing in line." Because dignity, when protected, becomes a shelter, and justice, when seen, becomes a seed. So let me ask you, what kind of world are you helping plant? Life has a way of revealing truth, often when we least expect it. This story reminds us that dignity cannot be measured by the clothes we wear or the seat we board on a plane. True dignity lives in how we carry ourselves when no one is cheering, and especially when no one is kind. Evelyn Moore did not raise her voice. She did not strike back. Instead, she stood tall in the face of ignorance and let the truth speak for her. That kind of strength, the quiet kind, comes not from titles but from years of walking with integrity. In today's world, it's easy to feel unseen or to believe that doing the right thing no longer matters. But it does. It always has. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is remain calm. Stay true. And let time bring justice. So if you've ever been misunderstood, looked down on, or judged unfairly, remember this: you are more than what others see. You are the sum of every kind act, every wise word, every battle endured with grace. Stand firm. The world is still watching, and the example you set may be the one someone else learns from tomorrow. It wasn't the trial. It wasn't the headlines. The real moment of power came much later, quiet and unannounced. Evelyn sat alone in her chambers, a soft light spilling over old case files, the warmth of her tea rising in the stillness. Her wrists had healed, but the memory remained. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. She had endured, and she had not been broken. There is strength in surviving, in refusing to shrink, even when no one is watching. In the months that followed, policies were rewritten, officers retrained. A new code of accountability took shape, not because of outrage, but because of the quiet weight of truth. Evelyn's case didn't just restore her dignity. It reawakened a conversation America cannot afford to forget. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.